Welcome to the final round. A couple of quick announcements before we begin. First, as a reminder, shut off your cell phones. There are enough people in here that could be distracting. Second, the panel has asked that I announce that this may be the last final round in the history of the NDT where all 5 judges use paper and pens to flow. So they're proud of themselves. And we should thank the people that are willing to judge this debate. Ron Stevenson, Ryan Galloway, Will Repko, Jared Atchison, and Callum Matheson. And with that, I'll turn it over to the first affirmative speaker from Wake Forest.
Some quick thanks to John Brushke and all the Fullerton debaters and coaches and everyone helping out with the tournament. It's run smoothly, been great. Thanks to my parents, because I guess you thank your parents at times like this. And thanks to Frank Seaver, Ed Williams, and Paula Nettles, who basically taught me everything I know a long time ago and taught me what it meant to compete for things. And the Wake debate team really couldn't be any better. All of you who don't debate for Wake have probably made a mistake. They're the most loyal and awesome and hardworking teammates you could ever have. CC and MS really couldn't be better. And more than that, even Wake debate for all time, like all the alumni are just the most loyal bunch. And the comm department and Randy Rogan, the chair, always provide a lot of support. And thanks to Eric Forsland who helped us out this weekend, and Waldinger who came back after being a graduate assistant a few years ago. I love that guy. And all the graduate assistants I've ever had have just been great. Blake and RJ and Sarah and Paul and Packer. And Tay and Sean Nandry who showed up this year couldn't be more dedicated, couldn't do more work, couldn't be nicer. The 3 assistants who are leaving, D'Lo is the nicest, most dedicated guy ever. He's great. If he goes to Kansas next year, they're lucky to have him. Casey is the hardest working guy in debate and a great teacher. Lamballe's 2AC last debate. I mean, Lamballe's the best guy in the world, but if you want to see that Casey can coach, that 2AC and everything Casey has taught us is just great. And, God, this is sort of tough. Okay. Brad Hall is like the world's greatest role model and really one of the best friends I've ever had. And it's his sixth and last year at Wake. And he's just a great guy. And he's a great guy. And JP is the same. It wouldn't be what it is without JP. And you always know JP cares about what's happening. And anything I said about Ross, you all know. There's just no one better than Ross. And there's no one more dedicated to debate. And no one who cares more about the people who do it than the people at Wake. And everything I've said about all the great people on the Wake team and all the great Wake alumni and all the great Wake coaches is almost entirely due to Loudon. Without Dr. Loudon, there wouldn't be much of it at all. And 3 years ago, I knew Lamballe in high school and liked him a lot. And he said, come to Wake and debate with me. And that was the best decision I ever made. And I love Dartmouth too. They're great guys. I just love them. And I can't give speeches when I don't have a time limit, so we're going to do the one I see. Condition 1, terrorism. Al-Qaeda was regenerated, carrying out attacks on the U.S. McConnell laid out getting into disposing of the threats to the U.S. Al-Qaeda been able to regenerate operation capabilities to conduct attacks from abuse and safe havens, Pakistan, regroup, plan protection, London, Syria, here we continue focus on procurement of the U.S. mass casualties against Kade, training, positioning operatives for attack, racing, and function to recruit terrorist groups, attempting to acquire chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, try or die, it's inevitable. Olsen 07, Mueller's Nettles, opinion, terrorism, exaggerated analysts, various political consideration, virtually unanimous contract, R1, 20% per year, probability, nuclear assault, nuclear technical greater, 50% better expression may underestimate the risk of said nuclear terrorism is inevitable. Al-Qaeda substantially reconstitute leadership, moved out, accident, nuclear bomb, open literature, Russia, most likely source, both second source, Korea, Pakistan, countries, essential ingredient, if terrorists can make a working bomb in less than a year, doubt the ability of terrorists to look more than they can hide it. Inavailable marijuana will occur in a decade. FBO 7 surveying America's top foreign policy experts, terrorism index only operates if nonpartisan effort to assess the U.S. fighting the war, terror conditions go more 30 greedy. 4% do not believe the U.S. is winning, 80% expect the terrorist attack within a decade. They'll use WMDs for extinction. Alexander 03, terrorists introduce new scale of violence, international station, brutalization, terrorism, nuclear, energy, super terrorism, biological, chemical, nuclear, cyber, serious implications of global security, who's affected by terrorism, material, the survival, and global nuclear war, SPEED 06, and little materials necessary to construct nuclear weapon, technical barriers, not significant number of methods, delivered by making critically likely terrorists to employ weapon terrorists, attack against immense pressure in the U.S. retaliate, nuclear weapons, massively increasing casualties, triggering a full-scale nuclear conflict, and bioterror causes extinction, signed under 97, use of pathogen rapid control, lethal pathogen efficiently spread capable, initially intensifying cascade disease, ultimately threatening the entire world population. They'll target the food supply, 0 no force food supply to track the terrorist target relatively easy to accomplish, just more export, freely available agents, choose from only bioterrorism, microterrorism, little risk handling pathogens, very little training, required no special wisdom, reweaponized because add concentration, no small amount of pathogen, high terror yield, weapons, and trust. animals and cells, primary vector for transmission, and destroys genetic diversity, deadly O2, terrorist biotechnology, represent danger, agricultural ecosystem, disease, proliferate, non-toxic species, genetic diversity, destroying our varieties, livestock breeds critically, important asset, global agriculture, subject to severe damage from weapons releases, extinction, Fowler 90, while concerned about nuclear war, equal devastating time bomb, taking away loss of genetic diversity, running with extinction, influence the environment, destroying in relation to the other diversity narrow. Also, the future renders survival more precarious. U.S. seed exports flight to Africa, Latin America, Asia. The terrorism collapse the global economy. Colucci 07, other atrocity, recapping energy prices, stock markets, consumer confidence, slamming the brakes, low economic property, economic impact significant. Negative effect American global economy, global nuclear war, May 92, global economy shrinks, facing international conflict, Russia and India, billions of nuclear weapons, poses danger to world order, and cyber terrorism risks accidental nuclear war, Symbol 99, nuclear assets, hierarchies of cyber warriors, asymmetrical system warfare, 9 U.S. nuclear response, successful information strategies, contribute failure to turn to informed accidental war escalation, operational directions, supported by Iraq's attack, kills billions, 4098, accidental nuclear attack, intelligence response, all out nuclear exchange, resulting billions of casualties worldwide. They'll target nuclear reactors, causing extinction, Wasserman O2, certainty of retaliation, turn nuclear power bombs, potential weapons, apocalyptic destruction, planes could have obliterated atomic reactors, guns, intelligence, disease, ecosystems, permanently destroyed, reactor bombs obliterate core of our life and all future generations, sparks U.S. retaliation, sports working on one terrorist attack, made atavistic defense mechanism, national center rearrangements, frontier divide us from them, another spectacular technical red calculated and U.S. Europe terror resilience hatred, flinging missiles indiscriminately towards exposed havens, extinction, Crucio 5 end of the world scenarios, outrage, man, parasite, retaliate, first impulse will be a nuclear strike on Mecca, apocalypse, Soviet Union, see opportunity to grasp victory, Mr. Strike be preemptive, Russia, China, U.S. drawn into attacking one another, U.S. weakness on terror is the basis for global aggression and war, Silverberg 06. Only resolve is respect, attack America, requires America to depict weak perception, represents great threat to civilization, misperceptions lead to war, active terrorism, and belief is America's weak, pursues South East Current Syria, attack to spare American vulnerability, let monsters growth, Kade green fair with North Korea, green and green permanent, not isolated, interest located to cognizance. Of fact, U.S. failed to trump aggressively, terrorist attacks and citizens, pay roots by American seizes hostages, let the Canadians conclude U.S. in decline, America's decline, weakness, serves to call armed monsters to the world, acts of peace, not to away from the anti-American hatred, U.S. should step and support involved in World War III against new totalitarians, attempt to bring us to our knees, and signaling a hard line on terrorism is key to global leadership. Henderson, 99 meaningful straight hinges on power, America's Canadian global primacy, West handles renegade states, absolute U.S. leadership, anarchy, will grow into way greater extremist world scene, terror, social, deadly challenges, military, technological prowess, and absolute indispensability key. International player, no other state demands similar world standing, veto holds American leadership, House Squad, American central realities, America act like a sham, not allowed to spread our lose on the country, the last cold, when you're getting world events, one side, the planet, flips action, feel exciting, U.S. response, regional world, wide implications, leaders are conclusively responsible, political inaction, vacuum, second states, global nuclear war, Gleals on 95, U.S. leadership, concluded, another global right to lead the world, global nuclear exchange, and critical signal deterrence to keep sustained allies, button 07, pushing out line to tailor deterrence challenges to terrorist networks, while sharing allies, 30 credibility, making messages, critical deterrence allies, concerned about the world, U.S. capabilities, and deterrence, U.S. allies, reassuring that confidence, American reliability, specific capabilities matter, assurance deterrence in the eyes of the holder alliance, to solve nuclear war, Ross 99 for prevention of conflict, and David WMD, American government's not police alone, the only way to dominate the capabilities, U.S. upholding powers, corporate security, investors, world, any hope of avoiding warfare, nuclear, other WMD, terrorism is the linchpin of U.S. Australian cooperation, the ANZUS, Orbit 04 strengths, U.S. Australian relations, more sustainable basis, must be advised, destroying the vitality of the alliance, remodeling American positions, like Australian interest, and tradition, Australian independent, policy to Australian cooperation, during regional conditions to be a risk, terrorism, biggest threat to Australia, goals ties, especially war, terror, showcase Australia's reliability, making Australian promises other areas more credible, U.S. Australian relations, key to Asian stability, down on one answer as a means of enhancing ties with the region, spenders on Australian U.S. relations, linchpin stability in the region, Australian U.S. cooperation, making greatest contributions to stability in Southeast Asia, that, so it causes new global nuclear war, given one barriers, maximum danger in Asia, situation in Asia, more uncertain, threatening and anywhere possible invasion war in Asia, involving major players, Korea, India, Pakistan, nuclear weapons, Asia, fighting military conflict, and contention 2 is credibility. In 05, Germany paroled Mohammed Hamidai, a terrorist who hijacked TWA Flight 847, murdered U.S. soldier. Instead of extraditing to the U.S., they returned him to Lebanon. U.S. remained silent, sending a global signal of appeasement. Shoes 05, there was an understanding Hamidai to be extradited to the U.S. Germans have released Mohammed served 16 years. Hamidai's extradition not Gannon. Germany supposed to be allied for terror action like bringing Hamidai demonstrated otherwise back to U.S. not making big deals when he's on 9/11. As well murdered more Americans than any other terrorist group. As was a component of Al-Qaeda trained terrorists in Lebanon. Trying to speech running the show bars with terrorism going free, very predictable. In action, on Hamidai shattered global perception of U.S. resolve. GRP 06, terrorism have been rewarded. Recently sent the wrong message of bold abduction of American media. Arrest many understand what refusing demands of world to send chaos. Early the words of offers with Sarah fighting God's split days to Germany. Freedom left means high attack of Hamid even jail life meaning demands only lead to increase in such taxes. U.S. was redoubled resolve, stand fast merchants to terrorists, the resolve was the right choice. And perception of U.S. terror weakness makes terrorism inevitable. Phillips 07 rejected peace and believing concessions of terrorism, creating a mistake and law promoted attacks like the West paper attack, little stomach prevailing, peace and only reinforced belief, peace and real war, encouraging the enemy more life winning. War and terror guard demonstrating the will to prevail in the long war, right idea speed the course to victory. The U.S. should condition assistance to Lebanon and extraditing Hamidai. They'll say yes, Fry. 07 Bush now to be giving Lebanon aid. However, before make the transfer one open issue, Lebanon needs to clean up extraditing terrorists. Hamidai currently hiding in Lebanon, $200 million. Lebanese government finding a way to make this happen as well. Last thing Lebanese government needs since. Being ready to assist Lebanon now is a perfect time to get our hands on this terrorist. Help Lebanon see money to allow money handed over. Nobody forced Lebanon to take U.S. aid. They should force during their terms. Have this one precondition. Our government hand over aid. Those have been turned over. Extraditing Hamidai from Lebanon. Kade versus dangerous precedent. Acquiescence to terrorists. Chesnoff 05. Naming family liberation. Convicted terrorist. Sends Hamidai's release or dangerous precedent. Thumbs up terrorist. License continue slaughtering. Getting son 9/11. Majority in London. That it's nonsense. Terrorists must be fought unwaveringly. As for Hamidai, we all just have them to demand Lebanese turn them over. Even if they say no, it protection image of resolve. Gardner 05 U.S. nuclear message dominance release unacceptable media action taken conquer call Lebanon hand over Hamidi release of Hamidi is speakers move production image cowardice weakness war and terror possible harmful signals terrorist groups will be emboldened. West enemies encourage more acts of terror. U.S. does everything sure Hamidi captures nothing having Gannon Bolton strike again clear message sent murder will neither be tolerated nor forgotten. Perceptions of U.S. resolve is vital. The war on terror gets to know 7 Muslim majority structures Islamism will receive being resolutely engaged in struggle hearts and minds. Muslim word buried Muslim perceptions are stronger except for acts winning the way of mass terror resolve never prove their real willingness to cooperate. Condition of the state they feel hurt. The more governments cooperate only they believe will win. If we not we lost the villagers fear the big conduct great strength the other side pure perceptions to strengthen resolve. Even if some terrorism is inevitable, resolve ensures wars attacks Traeger 05 targeting terror critical elements terrorist networks terrorist enterprise most highly but terrorist group principal importance Al Qaeda is to prevent them cooperating to achieve synergies. U.S. effectively prevent cooperation killing sanctuary groups and cooperating with Al Qaeda strategies to leverage terrorist actions motivation carry the power resolve not to make down the face terrorism demonstrate whenever possible reducing the magnitude of attacks prevents lash out Conley of 3 million casualties suffered due to attack most important variable determining the nature of your supplies will keep question to the response bombing in Lebanon resulting in preemptive death no serious retaliation event all equivalent to Pearl Harbor plot nuclear retaliation be more than just a possibility. The plan's incentive creates positive some cooperation undermines terrorism frying 04 anti-terrorist policy positive approach important advantages terrorist government transform positive some game makes an effort to utility terrorist programs alternatives to terrorism undermines cohesive terrorist organization incentive is ever present terrorist leaders know nature us leaders still lose control terrorist organization effectiveness reduced. Condition 3 is Lebanon cooperating on Hamidite terrorist attacks to destabilize Lebanon. Fossil 06 Lebanon's cuddling Hamidite disappointing like the strikes made seed revolution positive change back terrorist resistance terrorist operatives creating instability land rest in the region Lebanon joined America sending clear message terrorist organizations terrorists like Hamidite their actions will not be tolerated. Lebanon chooses to be a partner in bringing discouraged terrorism another obstacle counts the most radical elements of society that escalates the broad Middle East war Central on 07 war instability breaking chaos Hezbollah's protests in Lebanon result in larger wars Saudi Arabia intervene Hezbollah and Hamas expand their struggle against Israel as a part of their Israel battle endangering access to Suez Canal extremists flood the Middle East wins out of control everyone in the Middle East fights everyone else for decades global nuclear war time back to the war break out in the Middle East and nuclear escalation be a strong probability of Middle East conflict trigger a world conflagration. Thus the United States federal government should offer the government of Lebanon significant increase in monetary aid if the government of Lebanon agrees to transfer Mohammed Hamidite into custody of the United States. Aid now across the board, UPI 25 record budget would produce popping deficits, push the budget to contain increases, foreign aid only 10% would be increases for AIDS programs, Mexico, Latin America, development, security passages, Israel, Egypt, Colombia, Lebanon, Afghan. Okay. Lebanese aid, Prabos 07, push closer to 41 million, Lebanon 07 include 35 to 4 million, EMF 935,000, IMED to push across 7 million, and supplementary aid for Lebanon, US committed several $100 million, Lebanon should building, push announced $30 million, Lebanese Reconstruction Administration reprogram $42 million, March training equivalent to LAF Administration $60 million, net to train ISF.
I need to have a second. Where's that? Okay, good. First question. You have some cards that are a bit scary on my name. Muslim majorities. You read evidence as to why people only respect questions of attack that requires America to be depicted as weak and vulnerable sales. I mean, why does the United States have to be hard or have meaningful statecraft on primacy? I don't, like, why?
What do you mean?
Like,
we read evidence that there are people who are planning to attack the United States and that the plans to demonstration of resolve will stop those attacks.
So you have to demonstrate, well, the cards talk about how they only understand force.
No, well,
only understand force.
I don't know if you name a card in particular, I can probably provide more detail.
Sure,
but all the cards
talks
speak to the cost calculations made by people who want to attack the United States. And the idea now that there's some statute of limitations on terrorism. Ali Hamidi killed a United States citizen and has gotten away with it. The plan makes it so that we go out and get him.
Time out. What about all the other times that we haven't, threatened resolve? For example, Iran has like hundreds of Al-Qaeda detainees in their prisons, and we haven't threatened anything towards them. Syria has terrorists in their country. There's terrorists in the Palestinian Authority. How do you solve any of those questions?
We read a number of pieces of evidence that say Ali Hamidi, when he, on television, killed a United States citizen and threw him out on the tarmac, sent a signal that terrorism by Hezbollah and other agents throughout the world is acceptable against Americans.
Okay, so
the plan resolves that.
You're still talking. The Gets evidence says that in Vietnam we lost because the villagers feared the Viet Cong to a greater extent than us. That's your warrant? It's like
that is one warrant in a card that has 10 or 11.
So we have to continue staying
in a 1AC that has 20 or 21 cards.
Okay, so the important thing is to continue staying hardline, and the weakness that could potentially be threatened is problematic, right?
Right. If we don't show resolve, it invites people to attack us.
Okay.
Which is bad.
The question of deterrence, right? Your card says the credibility of deterrence is talking about the response of force. Where does this card say assistance?
That card says if we have a credible signal of terrorism result,
the
we read
card-
solvency evidence for that,
the
or
card's
link to
talking
that,
solely-
that says the plan's assistant sends that signal
We're
result.
talking about moral.
Everything in the terrorism contention is just reasons why resolve against terrorism is good. The credibility contention is the link to that, proving that we established resolve.
Can I take you read cards on why we currently give them assistance, right?
Uh-huh.
Do you remove any of that assistance?
No, the plan offers new assistance and conditions on the return of Valley Economy.
How much?
200 million? $200 million.
Okay. Give or take?
Well, I mean, it's like we're not going to, defend your like $199 million counterclaim.
But 200 million is the
But it's
number?
going to be about 200 million. Yeah.
The plan in the vacuum provides
cool,
$200 million.
cool,
If you
okay.
counterplan to change
Okay.
that, it probably doesn't
That's
go.
cool, that's cool. Okay, so why would Lebanon say yes?
We read a piece of Fry 07 evidence that says for that sum of assistance, they could make it happen because they value the assistance more than they value holding on to
So
Hamid.
they value the assistance.
Oh, yeah.
They value
All things being equal, they don't want to extradite Hamid. If they were
Why don't-
given a
why don't-
cash incentive of $200 million, they'd find a way to make it happen. As would I.
Yep, we're good.
We're so glad to be here and have a lot of people to thank. A huge thanks to everybody in the debate community, and there's too many other teams and friends that we've made with everybody. But every single person who's been in this activity has made it better for us. The people who've made this particular tournament possible, a big thank you to the NDT Board of Trustees and Committee, the tab room staff, Greg Rosenbaum, who visited the tournament every year, and of course Cal State Fullerton, the Fullerton debate team, John Brushke, in particular, who have spent months and a lot of time preparing for the NDT, and who was gracious to host it this weekend. I want to thank the Wave debate team for debating us, and it's also been great debating you all this year. The Dartmouth debate team, Ken Strange, Catherine Clark, Jonah Feldman, Charles Olney, and John Turner. We would not be here without you, and what you've done means so much to us. Our debaters, Caroline and Shane, Cyrus, Jamie, Joel, Andrew, Dave Manero, and Trevor. Past Dartmouth debaters who are here for us this weekend, Alex Berger, Maggie Berthume, Ace, David Marks, and Brian Smith. I don't think I would be here without any of you either. I also want to thank my parents, including my dad, who was my first debate coach, and anyone who's following e-debate knows has been posting there to an embarrassing extent and asking for results. My first high school debate partner, Nick, who I wouldn't be here without, and Kade, who is the most amazing debate partner. It's probably cut about 6 out of the 10 tubs that are sitting there. And when you get to debate with one of your best friends, it's a really special experience, and it's been a great 4 years. Round of fun. The order is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 off. Then the Middle East deterrence advantage, and then the terrorism advantage. All set? Agent specification, third specify kills and ground debate, additional making mutual plan for clear strategy, dodge relevant ways, 2 kills, 1 C strategy, which makes the plan determines all arguments, politics, budget, trade-off, agency, something specification, later can do the work of the voting issues, how they use what they see, switch trust by the theory, kills and remain, and next, T substantial interpretation of the plan must provide over $230 million. This is substantial and it depends on context towards the phrases. Not even it's given change substantial circumstances determined by the context surrounding circumstances, and it's $230 million. The Voice of America 6, the substantial increase was forward. The age of 11 means people announced America will spend more than the age of 11 on more $230 million. Violation of the plan was only 200 is bad because buildings and government for negligible. There are thousands of small increases that are possible. We lose all of our least of big dissents that should have to read the evidence saying contextual they are substantial. They can't do so. Person we can't do this. Voting for current sex. T. Surgery agent is unconditional baker. 2 games. Strength
community provided service reform secretary to stop the unjustly A3 back into the district into the tree of the this conditional conditional turtle state primary objectives of the bill is proposed for engagement violation of the plan includes conditions of kills limits or if it cause like that the plan they can't plan on having to get together at anything to told you particular change of currency and or the stationary in other countries voting issue for affairs. Next, the Act's contrast towards the Middle East, the performance of racial power, even through a reduction of pressure, their approach to legitimacy, constant intervention, Valborn, for realistic referendum to the Middle East country, the representation of left of the Middle East, the consummation of death, using the world, the constitution, the world, the sexual and the West domination, the representation of the Middle East, the consummation of the city, the intervention of the African States, the Middle East, conflict, and representation of the Middle East, the West, the peaceful West, Middle East, impossible answer, and the Act's description of the suicide bomber relies on Palestinians and Lebanons into biological objects. This ensures their liquidation. Teflon 95. The media heavens for the team which fundamentals legal representation of the Middle East, power, taking first, the boiling point, the first, the Middle East, the control of the West Bank, long-term routine that forks out future to this report. Declaration of the people's imagination result of the world, the matter of what is around the taking situation, the persons finding reality, the discrepancies, the represents the reputations, they bear the religious domination, and control in the critical discourse of the Gaza. We see the construction of politics with increasing pressure, culminating the explosion, social practice, self-control, rationality, Western, the responses of the author of science, and the reasoning of the deviant anger is most powerful things, are looking at the funding mass and the critical form of revolution, and the isolated from each other, oppositional violence, resistance, can allegedly dismiss as senseless, destructive and dangerous, and the functional point of view, the reasoning, support with the reason, the economy, for resources, discourse, metaphors, destructive, fragile, boundary, protection, financials, the ethic, the object of controllable forms, the metaphors, but any community zero, contains the active device of reach force the day, draining of discourse from human agency, let us move the ideological implications of God's tripping, and the glory, device control of fears, caps, the purpose, the justification, and the mobilization, small paralyzing power metaphors, to reinforce the self-strive, divide the device, to prevent identification of the occupational emotional and together source of violence. And these scenarios are intimately connected to a colonial frame, ensuring genocide, annihilation, couture, 7, order, business, exceptions, order, a stagnant, rational, free, US, police, in the West, and let's countries describe the latest threat to hegemony, domination, exploitation of source, resources, including racial privilege, equated with hegemony, racial civilization, religion, perfect second war, annihilation, genocide, false appreciation of racial, should class, Soviets, the Muslims, and votes, of civilizations have been in recent debates, though their way of returning to exclusion of races, legitimation, exclusion of physical imagination, racialized exclusion, the internal logic, annihilation, the excluded annihilation, institutionalized of coverage, protecting genocide, this exclusionary ratio, ideology, the logically ultimate domination, war, genocide, police, the efficiency, serve racist, ideology, dizzying frequency, and alternative, you should refuse to occupy the position of the imperial problem solver, criticize the one that sees constantly the world according to Orwell's Slacker building, for the discourses that enables one to act and very meaningfully influence on the tip of the iceberg, the outlook is delivered by how I think the Middle East established a hierarchical distinction resulting in all this view is capable of referencing the problem solving for much constitutional reality for explain the organized knowledge of respect to the spiritual one of the testable scholars point the concept role to explain as opposed to maintenance and the should be neutral camera would restore the age of imperialism, rejecting their demand for immediate yes no policy response. The only way to raise ethical questions for the discourse and practice of iron in the Middle East based on 7. The defense members of the demand makes the necessary moment takes back discipline, publicity, power, and comfort, colonialism, imagery, love, the heart of discipline, to lose opportunity, secure this foreign policy, that there seems to be amnesia about the discipline, the publicity, the power, and power of the discourse to get the reproduce to discipline, to examine global power, this attempt to publicize the questionable discipline, and traps to return the scholars to think globally and politically, the greatest country to the consolidation, global professionalism, America reacting to bureaucrats, play, engagement with diplomatic role playing with the short battle, things larger material power, and then the massive administration leading Israel, speech culture, most serious stuff, intellectual competition, global seats, focus relative in the areas of knowledge, personal theories, and Muslims, which by power, assessment, the manner of work, fits the larger question of orientation, science, indictment, U.S. intellectual politics, personal sectors is resonant, contemporary context, critical praise, we're going to the questions raised the form against custom, sensitivity, not be raised, articles, to be heed to the critical historical ethical questions about the rest of the solution about politics, techno, expertise, next time. The United States federal government should offer the government of Lebanon a significant increase in monetary aid if the government of Lebanon agrees to transfer Mohammed Mohammed to the custody of the United States, unless the government of Lebanon agrees to extradite Mohammed Mohammed to the United States, and the United States will position warships in Lebanon's territorial waters. And Cold Move has put pressure on the scenario because there's so much uncertainty. I-229 mobiles in U.S. cultural shows Lebanon show this the fear of the message to see Lebanon coercion diplomacy. There's no escaping confrontation. Sorry. Okay. Next guideline. The United States federal government should offer the government of Lebanon a significant increase in monetary aid only if the government of Lebanon agrees to transfer Mohammed Mohammed to the custody of the United States, and if the government of Lebanon commits to freezing financial assets of organizations designated as territories suspended in the United States, and they say yes financial leverage, imperial wars, get financial and terror cooperation, and versa. Some money tax as a foreign policy to investigate authenticity, the way which use toolbox of financial expertise and use cutting banks and use financial sometimes or worse, or reverse treasury secretary of health and interventional target approach will property. Many officials to serve specifically to blacklist almost immediately the financial institutions around the world begin to hit and fairly correct on bacteria, destroys Lebanon's economy, cable, and McDonald report. Relative to the economy, Lebanon's largest banking sector in the world, disposed of around 40 billion besides the sex of language. In recent years, Lebanon's bank have the collapse of the nearly dozen institutions causing major economic risk. On Monday, it was done already back the bank was laundering millions of discipline, imagine scandal, more part of the reputation of the monetary banking system. However, this short reputation with the prosecuting the Lebanese government trying to cover up the guarantees of huge minis war al-Ghazi to the financial collapse of the existing balances here in Israel. Lebanon's economy collapse and the government's control of Israel coming more slowly to the operation than over the front of the economic collapse for the shock of the fragile stability, stability, surrounding the air, Israel, conflict, destruction, and basically the region into war Next, go back to the original counter plan, and we're going to amend the counter plan. The United States federal
Scratch counter plan.
Scratch first counter plan. Next, Lebanon's central bank has inflation under control now. Gold dealer news 216. Lebanon's central bank represents inflation is not expected 5%. So the next expected to see inflation record was not imminent. And increased foreign assistance because rampant inflation because the exchange rate in Jersey and steel and worker and 5 domestic inflation is over whatever there's large full of war funds such as unique officials associated with aid of the necessary and notable actual foreign capital investments spill over to the domestic economy. Non-tradable factors the amount of capital assets to be replaced with given uniform assistance low program of non-global exchange programs with the foreign assistance and increased Lebanese inflation risk valuing world widespread currency and banking crisis. 99. The countries following the fixed does not have the option of devaluing the currency. The fixed banks are for speculators with fixed banks is liable for the currency. The banking system is most of all the characteristics of Lebanon and Lebanon's banking sector scheme is international Islamic bank consolidation dealers are 6. Lebanon is potentially a lucrative market for Islamic banking and diversified communities. Islamic bank and allied back to Lebanon. The Islamic banks in Lebanon are several development initiatives that found their way to other regional markets. Banks use Lebanon as a base for cross-border corporations, but so the local economy and Islamic bank consolidations. You'll notice they have often pending across Asia. Money 7. With Lebanon, Islamic banking government challenge to keep up with that one. Last week, we were just going over the pressure. Islamic bank is a highly fragmented industry. The consolidation so badly needed consolidation is a good thing. Is imperialism is the physical consolidation of Islamic bank is no longer with the opportunity. Global Islamic financial institutions a little bit to emerge less shape up. They will be shipped out as some crisis left the world. The breakdown crisis, the credit crisis. Islamic bank is all this averting a brutal treatment of the world is not significant. The financial bubble continues to spread into others. There's still very famous stories. Investors Islamic banks are truth and taking these access to the Islamic credit markets or investing in real assets and paper assets. Bills such as all what we the dynamics of Islamic paper children, the financial markets on the Islamic banks and hip hop watch transactions, the U.S. Supreme Court and global country shatter. Paraphrase extinction daily 90 the World War III documents incidents of our historical liquidations and logically the use characteristic function of the other global art conflict and greatly increase on time with the country's ability to kill the very hopes of future of humankind. And next is the disabilities appear to not the Iraq war short caused in the previous war in Lebanon. This impacts escalating through well, this is essentially impossible to her credibility to true by military power history proves press. 5. Then neither Eisenhower nor Kennedy just the credibility of people who measure crucial terms never do credibility German assassin's Persian French credibility not affected by peace and 7. You can find evidence of medieval card after 5 years searching for back news measure credibility virtually nothing when credibility was at stake. The case was striking so long change of the action Prussian French but it's look credible German as long as the Allies have power back to the lost credibility with a balance of power so long with its leaders credibility they focus on the Allies power to stop aggression not the best of the European resources is not credibility of Allies credibility that claims that one people is truly valued and decision makers the credibility of balance power and interest not the adversaries for breaking the future commitments will be credible if only the background of strength and connection to weighty interest next is terrorism. They make it worse by appeasing and creating moral hazard margin 7. Offering positive made scenes and the war activities mentioned but this induces moral hazard and change the individual's behavior in the wrong way and there's no joke terrorism no motivation. Robert's Moody 2. The terrorists are not people capable of the alien sponsors there's one people watching that did civil so they demonic of the real which currencies but they're will not fully engage in allocating other organizations that keep the terror it's almost entirely decentralized and impossible to incentivize the statement. 8. And 7 level the threat of confirmed they must change dramatically most imagine the mobile allocated the individuals for the most demonstrated terrorists can say don't answer to the law also hard new jiggers terrorists homegrown wannabe subgroup of leadership building connection to the that the rules and significant from the destruction or discipline leading more different than their terrorists forbearance and the terror threat is exaggerated and empirically not more. 6. Americans regularly terror protection from major rocket detects no breach which government pronounced terrorist strikes involving WT before 2004 so using terrorists to moderately competent why they're not done almost no terrorists use have means of regular striking more of same side the total number kills inside level is not much higher than those who drown in bathtubs fear of being overblown in the air greatly exaggerated no risk of nuclear terrorism too many hurdles. Mueller 7. There are dozens of hurdles with almost comparable but success is almost finished self community and construction of single bombs difficult interesting extremely exacting requirements versus unfeasible hardly accomplished by subnational groups. Cyber terrorism is not a threat agreement. 5. Cyber terrorism is not a threat to the U.S. national security alarm so that aspects of credible American history have individual world war street a lot of bombing campaigns to fail to hurt industrial terrorism environment economies reports 2002 CSIS report notes that the global network must be the information is vulnerable to U.S. power groups by 300,000 producers that have never been caused block of the use water similar robust use air traffic over horizons and denial of the service attacks the not deadly most passing on those terrorist attack kill by the local source attacks and peeling cybersecurity rules and far more to worry about the traditional hackers and terrorists no bioterror. New statesman 1 statesperson 1 Jennifer Grace the bioweapons which will bruise not stairs and the responsibility victim role the U.S. still be to prevent the means to do this the terrorists would have to find disappearance in the air much more difficult to imagine accomplishing not be useful.
So we ended up with 6 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about T substantial.
Yep.
Your evidence that substantial foreign assistance is $230 million says Secretary of State Rice will announce a substantial aid package for Lebanon. A senior official said it would be a vigorous effort in comparison to the $230 million pledged by Washington. This evidence says $230 million is a substantial offer. It doesn't say 200 is not. It does say 200 is not vigorous, which is not a word of the time.
230 is.
Right, it says 230 is a vigorous effort.
No, it's right. It says substantial increase. The vigorous was.
No, it's a substantial aid package. It does not say the aid over which Rice was increasing was not substantial. It just says it was not vigorous.
It says substantially increasing U.S. aid to the Lebanese people.
Right, it's 230. That doesn't mean 200 is not. Okay. Let's talk about
why that's how it's defined contextually in the context.
Let's talk about the add a condition counterclaim. No, let's talk about the critique alternative. Who's the agent of the critique alternative?
I don't know what that means.
When you say the app should be refused, who refuses the app?
We think that that's what we should do. We should not endorse.
What you should do, what Dartmouth KO should do, what the panel should do, what the United States
we
federal government
shouldn't
should do.
support the plan. One should not support the plan.
I should do.
We don't think it's a good idea to vote for the plan. We
Okay.
think it's a good idea to
A good idea, not a good idea in what sense? Like if the panel does it, you're going to beat them up, or like?
It's just a question.
Okay.
Our ideas are better than yours.
Okay, can the alternative ever result in the plan, or does the alternative ever change policy towards Lebanon in any way? US
Our
federal
evidence
policy
says
towards
that's
Lebanon
not
in
the
any way.
question that we should be answering. The question we should be answering
Well,
is
it
how
is
we
because I
produce
asked you.
knowledge about. Right, and we're saying that's the link. That is what we are critiquing.
Cross-ex questions are the link?
Yes.
Okay.
We should not be
Let's talk
focusing on
about
solving through policy the problems.
the added condition counter plan. You agree that we should condition $200 million of assistance to Hamidi, or to Lebanon, on the extradition of Hamidi with your counter plan. You just think we should have another condition as well.
No, we think we should not do the part of the plan that gives them the assistance if they don't do the demand that we have.
Okay, the plan gives them the assistance if they give us
Even if
Hamidi,
they don't
which
do
both
what
the
we
plan
demand.
and the counter
We pick
plan
out of
agree
the
is a
part
good
of the-
policy by the
We
United
pick
States
out of the
federal
part of
government.
the plan that gives them the assistance even if they don't do what the counter plan demands.
If we established a policy of the counter plan and someone asked a United States federal government official, is that assistance conditioned on the return of Ali Hamidi, what would be that official's answer? Yes or no?
No. That's like saying
Okay,
if the plan
so how
was-
does it solve the case
if
if the counter plan does not condition it on
If
the
the
extradition
plan,
of
if
Ali
the
Hamidi?
plan was wash a car for $5 and the counter plan was wash the car for $10,
Hey,
they said,
Seth,
it's
why
wash
didn't
the
you
car
ask us
for-
who our agent was in the 1AC cross-ex?
Why?
Mhm.
Because we had already been preparing, so we just weren't able to.
What do you mean you'd already?
We didn't have enough time. We had already created the strategy.
You asked the question about Kade Orientalism like 5 times. Why couldn't you ask who the agent of the plan was instead?
Well, because.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, I'd also, I guess, like to say a few things. Seth has already thanked sort of a lot of the people that we had to thank in common a lot more eloquently than I ever could. So I'll just sort of reiterate a couple of those very quickly. I'd like to thank Fullerton for hosting a great NDT and the NDT committee for also just putting on a great tournament. I'd like to thank Dartmouth, not only for this debate, but I mean all the debates we've had this year, and that applies to all of our opponents throughout the tournament and just everyone in the debate community. You know, I love this activity, and that's why I'm here. And you know, sort of, I guess, you know, it really makes it all worth it to kind of see everyone here and interact with all these great college students and coaches. I'd also like to thank my family. Without their support, I would not be here or you know, where I am today. The weight debate team, as Seth said, is absolutely great. Every member of the team has contributed something to not only us being here, but just the overall team dynamic. It's a great environment to work in every day. I'd like to thank specifically the coaches, all kind of by name, because they all have a lot to do with us being here. They all devote a lot of time to us debating and, you know, really receive very little or at least not an appropriate amount of thanks during the year. As Seth said, Loudon is no longer, I don't think officially associated with the debate team, but is just really the spirit of the weight debate team, and it really means a lot to be able to look back and see him in the back of the room today. Ross Smith, who you know is the head coach or director, I guess now, and has been there every step of the way. JP, who has done a phenomenal job organizing the main sort of research and tournament progress of the program this year. Brad Hall, who, as Seth said, is leaving us this year after 6 years of weight debate, who just defines what a weight debater is and was our personal coach this year and has just been there every step of the way for us. Casey, you know, I'll reiterate sort of the hard-working comment. The hardest working person in debate, just produces thousands of pages of evidence, and I just honestly don't know where he finds the time to do it. D'Lo, just the nicest guy and the most helpful person you can ask for, just is always there before the round. We've got 3 new graduate students this year who have all made an amazing impact. Andrew Reed, Taylor Hahn, and Sean Lochtefeld have all come this weekend and contributed a lot to our success. We've had a couple other people help us out at this tournament who, you know, aren't even at Wake Forest, which has been amazingly helpful. Patrick Waldinger and Eric Forsland have both contributed a bunch of research and just moral support at this tournament. It's also really great to sort of have a lot of friends associated with the program who come back even after their teams are out to help us out. Both Joseph Hacker and Adam Abelkop have come after their teams were out of the tournament and helped us out, and I really, you know, appreciate that, and they deserve our gratitude. I'd like to thank, just all of our friends and past coaches of the program who are all here kind of supporting us today, and it's meant a lot. And last and certainly not least, I'd like to thank Seth, who has just been, the best partner I could ever ask for. And, it really means a lot just to be here with him more than anything else. And, the fact that we did it together is, adds something special to it. So. The order will be the constructive engagement violation, the A-spec debate, the T substantially, the Lebanon advantage, the terrorism advantage, the critique, the counter plan, and the discipline.
Coordinated non-constructive mitigation by definition conditional libido change to baseball position or emphasizes the fundamental internal change and offer large condition not immunity. Now 2 offers the vice president rejection and rejection undertaking to something conditional part of who would assume the proposal is specified about promise in return and functional is keeping you force the opposite just like the entire construction against practice the law hundreds of cases that you guarantee your system of occurring anything return and ground ensures that this is based on guidance and negotiation and education is the only way to learn to ensure that the response of the target country is relevant. They limit the best cases like grand bargain and no bi-direction all the act can never decrease assistance remove guarantee and reasonability good is good enough competing terms to produce a reasonable now our athletes the substantive credit now the aspect of first kind of petition United States for government action and better debate puts a focus on policy rather than generic policy distinctions, which is especially true on a foreign policy topic normal means solves ground. They can research links to implementation and cross-sex abuse. They can ask for links. And safely regressive just by specifying an infinite number of play mechanisms, question predictable ground and no resource basis makes their interpretation unpredictable. And we still solve an unconditional field ensures that the plaintiffs enacted substantially. We meet the plaintiffs $200 million. That's our one C5 evidence, which is a huge amount, and so I'm sure their evidence is inconclusive. It was a large amount, not a substantial amount. No intent to define substantial foreign assistance is at least $10 million CBO. And some developing countries receive states foreign assistance. 30 countries receive at least $10 million assistance. We meet the plaintiffs $200 million. That's our fire evidence. It's best. A is ground ensure spending on politics links and perceptions of links based on the dissent. It's also not a voting issue. Country-specific dissents like pro checks and guarantees the negative tons of ground. And there's no abuse to get tons of arguments. Conditional plan and out of conditional, unconditional politics, Lebanese politics, terrorism, critiques, etc. Reasonability is best. Cross-apply that off the other flow. Additionally, boxes out Syria or actually solvency advocate solves predictability when fire evidence indicates that we should do $200 million. Additionally, their interpretation is $230 million, which is only $30 million more than half, which is totally a stupid distinction. Now, the Lebanon debate will concede that the Middle East war is inevitable. This takes out the impact of their out-of-condition counterplay. Additionally, their credibility arguments are totally stupid. Our GRD and social evidence indicates that specifically in the context of Hamnai, our credibility has been heard. We have more specific evidence, which is the reason why you should prefer it, even if their interpretation is better evidence. So we're now the terrorism debate group, and they have conceded 6 independent scenarios, which means that they have absolutely no hope of winning any defense on the case. First of all, they concede credibility is necessary to hegemony and alliances, which is the impact in multiple nuclear wars by her Khalzad, and Ross evidence. They have also considered their nuclear reactors evidence that the terrorism target leads to a sanction that to Washington evidence. They have conceded their food terrorism advantage, which indicates that they will infect the visible genetic monocultures will ultimately lead to extinction impact by our fouler evidence. They have conceded that the plan is necessary to solve the ulcer-strained relations, which is necessary to call the global nuclear wars. They have conceded that terrorism attacks are inevitable within the next 10 years, which will lead to global retaliation impacted by extinction by, of course, the evidence as well as the economy evidence, which outweighs and turns the only disadvantage that they have in the round, because it indicates that if terrorism is inevitable, then so is the impact of the disadvantage. We are not going for our nuclear, bio, or cyber terrorism scenarios, which is the only evidence that there is specific to. Now, drop to the moral hazard debate that turns outweighs credibility, demonstrating that terrorism will be unsuccessful with the motivation to attack, even if they're bold. And that's for Phillips evidence. Additionally, the plan creates positive some cooperation, solves the motives and means of terrorism, is incentive for present alternatives to terrorism, and fracture the cohesiveness of violent organizations as a free evidence. Additionally, we saw the independent internally to means resolve against Muslim cooperation, cutting off support for terrorism, even if they're emboldened in that forgets evidence. Additionally, there's no link because extradition to Lebanon was hazard. Additionally, we saw the impact because we restore global credibility. Now the critique, first of all, is resolve the impact towards the alternative intellectually wishing way sends a signal of weakness that causes the attacks and impact towards the critique. The government will crack down and destroy the Z911 procedures through the framework. So we should get away the impact and advantages against the critique. It's necessary for this, and otherwise they can simply wish away the entire case and cover peacetime and have additional vision. The impact imperialism isn't caused by global violence. 2,000 years of history proves the escalation is false. Additionally, the agentless alternatives are bad because they're utopian and they're nowhere compared to the affirmative literature. They're also totally unpredictable and not comparable with form of action. Additional permutation to the plan and all parts of the alternative that don't conflict with the plan. This all is best for rejection shields the status quo from criticism. Darby 97. If the IR influences the insurance that the key to understanding global politics, making the global politics has certain aids to the constituted and ineffectiveness. The needs to engage with the Senate of the perspectives no longer marginal ability of the Senate will continue with the shield. The experience the edge from the view. Additionally, the negative doesn't give you out. There's no basis for negative out additional ground by allowing them limitless advocacy. Additionally, the counterplan of the alternative voting issue makes them inherently conditional because they have the all becomes a gateway issue skewed to see time and strategy statistically more abusive than two counterplanes because it's two entirely different procedurally purely discursive focus dooms anti-colonial efforts. Concrete reality must be addressed as castle in a one-name for oriental discourse where simplicity is any application of reality. The condition to colonialism is simply discarded. The discourse has ultimately meant we have learned a lot about discourse and have a definition of discourse in detail. The conditions discourse was ultimately framed. Additionally, the alternative critical theory is no mechanism to turn the theory into practice. Jones 99. The runs of critical about something in the thinking does not guarantee any statements have also been consideration of how critical politics has been central about that plausible mechanism. The hope I think the critical theory is also fatal to fight enterprise. Additionally, theoretical critique is nothing to change the material conditions of oppression. The alternative leaves millions burning in the hells of exploitation. This is Angela Woodling. In 97 distant art paralyzes itself with non-action is also shocking and attacking the double when this is art has the power without offering program for action burning hells of exploitation civil war. Why this is not observed critically and so we're just in the ends of reproducing this kind of discourse and divorce from actual practice and critical theory from problem solving. Additionally, there's no impact of colonialism, Dickinson, and overclosing the kind of river state, nowhere to develop the radicalizing characterized the national system, psychological the economy of the predation to mass murder. There's also political potentials to very for Nazi Germany, social political and by power will be incompatible with authoritarianism and have also imposed the increasingly narrow limits on coercive structures perish not be read as universally secondly glad from mining all can be combined in different ways with different parts of the strategies like totalitarianism and the kind of welfare state. Additionally, the war on terrorism is good. Violent interventions are the only way to check appeasement and red escalating war speeders for making the enemies and sufferers quickly and evaluating the activity passivity and appeasement harvesting encourages them to make these throughout the sanctions never mistake distracting the enemy who wants to kill us as well. Terrorism believe the U.S. was all luster. The display of strength and resolve is indeed made it easy for an American to save, although the struggle will continue in many forms. The to come cannot expect instant success when faced by a problem that more many centuries there's evil in the world. We've not gone under we've not been fortunate back then. We have not finished anything in the struggle, but we've made an impressive start on the conflict. Permutation due to conflicts outside and states functional offer allows for changing conditions, works and increases and no some dispute for resolution is built to the employees and offers notwithstanding the employer reserve right to change the ability of posting number of promises by this illusionary B is textual just as words like permutation to objective way to eliminate back time state and permutation do both and permutation both offers and adding a condition is voting issue A is ground potential conditions are infinite not related to the plan. They could pick anything under the sun really advantage about it. This artificially competitive and possible to predict B is education legitimizes any condition counterpoint including a stupid stuff like Greenland, icebergs or UFO contract attracting to the topic education and conditional this voting issue creates time and starts to use it non-reciprocal misargument of the responsibility to dispose of their offense. It doesn't solve the case adding condition to lose the signal of the plan. Harmony should be the sole focus of U.S. efforts linking to other issues. To other issues symbolically makes it less important and sends the message that other strategic goals are equally important. The impact is global result in terrorism. That's when Fry and Gardner oppositionally risk of the signals high Newsom and not to 8 months to be difficult to determine the exact anti-council fleet supporting the conflicting of the surface as internal political base. Additionally, clear signal reliability is key to sustain global alliances. That's what amnesty in fact is new to global nuclear war and global nuclear war. That's a Ross amnesty and clarity is key to deter terror. England and also global leadership fighting against terrorism. The perception of success in the cabinet that kind of people will watch our actions at this year will be very important to unify the world will be rock solid and ourselves additionally conditioning it on Hezbollah is a symbolic victory boost. The support for the organization, this is goal to no 6. The short-term Atlantis is given another political victory that has part of the immediate is the statement would have accepted the American aid and way to play game should be the Lebanese government independent of Hezbollah. Ran Nexus additionally say no reforms are impossible. Even small opposition will derail the counterplan. This is Chahar and us main obstacles likely to go here in authority for Lebanon is divided the political and administrative process. Any degree of dissatisfaction causes the government to disintegrate. It will be impossible to generate a new power framework. Additionally, do the plan and condition other aid on the issue. The dissent. versus that it's 98 because there's massive aid to Lebanon. Now they have conceded a couple of warrants versus military aid. This is Starlight Journal 7 in the U.S. has directly increased military aid in Lebanon to show support for Western support. The water for Western Lebanon automatic ammunition about vision goggles, additionally aid for the judicial reform was just distributed in term through one. The USA National Party will spend $7 billion in judicial reform in Lebanon. Will ultimately go to the NDT. The limited judicial system, the USA will work with the judicial, military, justice, custody, military trying to improve the administration of the administration's independence. The U.S. is providing tons of reconstruction aid down this to Olsen to send the U.S. and European allies in regional partnership rally behalf of the Lebanese government to make the central massive economic assistance Lebanese with the government $750 million. Also in August, countries generate $940 million for relief and reconstruction. Additionally, the economy impact is inevitable. They have conceded that terrorist attack is inevitable. It will collapse the economy of the status quo. We have a faster time frame because they have conceded that it is inevitable in the short term. Additionally, the link is from 05 and the internal link is from 99, which is massively improved and denied by all the past aid that we have given since then. Additionally, the Abdullah evidence about the supply proves that it is totally inevitable. The status quo. Additionally, assisting Lebanon signals U.S. leadership and political credibility. AI and 6 U.S. play the U.S. commitment to serving the strategic ally of the United States to play a leader role becoming U.S. leadership and reporting to the reportability of world investing both steps and foreign policy projects to American values around the world. That's key to all the U.S. leadership's hand. And 5 American incentives to move across the border, American 60 American power of the cooperation with the cooperation of the dictator breeds with terrorism, preserve national rest of the world, no one can use this people are not obey. Well, this is why provides to the enemy this is being embraced of America's soft power.
Can we get the cards on attic condition?
Okay. All right. Can I sell a card right now?
And you get the key cards already.
Yeah. All right. What are the functional limits on constructive engagement?
What do you mean?
Well, we'll just come to the point. You said that attic conditions check all the infinite quid pro quos, and then on the counterclaim you said that it's illegitimate, which is true.
Well, we didn't say that added condition checks all the quid pro quos. We simply said that you have to have a justification for the entire constructive engagement package.
Okay, so is that legitimate negative ground or not?
Well, I mean, you say that the counterclaim isn't legitimate negative ground.
Okay, so,
You know,
all right, cool. On the, explain what the signal is, plan results in that results terrorism.
What the signal is?
Yes.
We specifically go in and say that you have to give us hominy, and if you don't, then we're not going to give you the aid.
Okay.
So it directly sends a signal that there are no statutes of limitations on terrorism.
Okay.
Hominy will be hunted down, and he will be brought
If
to
this is
American
going to
justice.
spill over and deter and solve all the other instances of terrorism, how come nothing else the U.S. has ever done in the war on terrorism has already spilled over and created this perception?
Because it's not about just like, you know, lashing out in the world and creating false resolve. Our argument is that we have to act resolve in every instance. And hominy
Every
is...
instance? Do you have evidence that says after the plan we are going to now intervene or make quid pro quos with every country who's ever supported terrorism?
No, but we do have specific evidence that indicates that hominy is a specific example of weakening U.S. resolve because he killed an
terrorist
American
organizations
citizen
are going
on
to
TV.
perceive
We
the
did
plan?
nothing.
What terrorist organizations are going to perceive the plan and change their activities?
Well, all terrorist organizations will receive the plan and know that there is no statutes of limitations.
Interests.
What? Because it proves that their terrorist operation will be shut down as soon as they carry out an attack. The
If they're
second
going to be
internally to our
deterred by
advantage.
that, why wouldn't they be deterred from other methods of retaliation?
From other methods of retaliation, because any method of retaliation against the United States would result in them being killed.
No. Why
Yes.
weren't they deterred from current forms of retaliation, i.e. terrorist attack,
Because that
leads to us
retaliation
invading
has no
countries?
credibility since we let him get away with it.
Okay,
He killed a U.S.
so-
citizen and we didn't retaliate.
Okay, so your argument is
That's
that...
just the reason why the
okay.
rest of the status
How about
quo
all the
is
other
fine.
instances where there have
Fix
been
this
terrorist
yourself.
attacks and the specific group was not found?
What other instances? Like
The-
9/11, we like attacked 2 countries. I mean, like
Okay.
we
So
have
the
responded
world's
very
terrorist-
violently
so
to
the
terrorism
world's-
in the past, and this
okay.
is like an isolated
So the
incident in
world's
which we were like,
terrorist
okay, whatever.
organizations have previously been deterred because we intervene every time, and now they see this one dude in Lebanon
It's not
saying,
just
we
now.
think we can get away with
No,
it
it's
now?
not just now. Like our argument is that the credibility of the United States has been significantly hampered since 2005 when we let this guy go. And
Okay.
this is
What-
a unique
what
instance
is your
in which we
argument?
have
What
to
is the
show the world
motivation?
that there is no
What
statute
is
of
the
limitations on
motivation?
terrorism.
What is the motivation for the terrorism?
Well, it doesn't matter what the motivation
Well,
is.
it does.
I wouldn't
We've
even
read evidence why there
pretend to
is no
understand the
motivation.
complex
We've read
motivations
evidence why
that
there is no
terrorists have to
motivation.
attack the
What's
United
the
States.
Right, so these are the only cards that are on attic condition?
Yeah.
Dude, these purple cards. Okay, before I speak, there's a couple of thank yous I'd like to do. First, the entirety of the Fullerton team, Brushki, and everyone that helped put this on, including the NDT Board of Trustees. I'd like to thank our opponents, Wake, again, for the awesome debates we've had, the number of people that we've debated so far at the tournament throughout the year. It's been extremely enjoyable to do, and I mean, it's been an amazing NDT to, I mean, it's just hard to watch. The hardest thing is watching people that you've known forever finish debate, and it's difficult. There's some people I'd specifically like to thank. First, all our team members that have been here today that help us out. Shane and Caroline have been the most hardworking team. I don't think they've slept in days, to say the least. Our number of first years that have been important, such as Joel that took off. Joel, Cyrus, Maneros, and Jamie have been extremely hardworking. They haven't slept in probably a week and a half. There's a number, our coaches I'd like to specifically thank. Charles for being one of the most hardworking people I've ever met, and also being able to calm me down before rounds, which is hard to do. Turner, who is probably one of the more intelligent, critical thinking minds I've ever met, and he has cigarette breaks with me even though he doesn't smoke. I'd like to thank Catherine, who was a joy to debate with and has been an amazing coach this year. And yeah, I'd also like to thank Jonah, who is his first year's coach for us, and to say he makes the debate team extensively less dorky, which is kind of hard for Dartmouth, and way more fun, to say the least. And he does, the amount of work he does insane. I'd like to thank Ken. I mean, he taught me how to debate, taught me how to debate. He's like a second father. All the people that have shown up that are with Dartmouth alumni, such as Maggie, Berger, Ace, for showing up to make fun of me today. It's been great. And then most importantly, I'd like to thank Josh, who, to say he doesn't, one of the most hardworking people I've ever met, my best friend, puts up with me, and is one of the most, I mean, amazing people. It's hard to understand if you haven't met him outside of the debate tournament, but amazing man. That's it. Too substantial. Inflation DA. Okay.
Substantial draw line on foreign assistant cases, especially in the context of Lebanon. We have evidences of substantial increase of foreign assistance. It's over 230 million, even if the clarifying cross-section is not adequate. Ace point, the firm can constantly shift the goalpost, in the 2AC depending on what the interpretation would be. These points critical to draw a hard line that explains in the context of Lebanon has been an increase of 230 billion, even if the increase by 200 million drawing a limit on a specific number, especially in the context, is critical. If not, there could be overwhelming number of things that can't depend on this. Is empirically proven, but all their cards on the plate and disadvantage explain what the increases in assistance are happening in the status quo. Things such as hundreds of millions of dollars more than affirmative. It's not clearly substantial. They say the 200 million argument doesn't so much do not have a card meet your interpretation. They say the evidence excludes the bullshit. Our words to phrase evidence has to be defined in the context of specific context of the specific resolution responding to, which means that has to be in the context of Lebanon. Our evidence explains why there was a substantial increase of foreign assistance of 200 million. Increase of 200 million was important, but greater than 230 million had to be a substantial argument, which means it is conclusive. They say at least $10 million. This card is awful. Ace points possible first to generate impartial perception arguments. Use he substantially gives $10 million to use before budgets over billions of dollars, which means they wouldn't even have to come out of the budget appropriation arguments. At this point, we can never establish a firm limit on the topic. Think of the small and infinite number 10 million cases you could run things such as increasing small number of food aid to Afghanistan. They say the speed of spending in politics links down to $10 million, giving that you wouldn't even have to increase appropriations. They say country specific is critical. That is irrelevant. True, we can rank country specific disadvantages, but that is not a winner in a world where we cannot generate the best majority links to be prepared to debate those arguments. Yes, everyone has arguments about Lebanon, but the firm perceptually had that purpose. They say the tons of arguments to respond limits clearly outweighs ground on this question. Even if they win this ground, we can depend on that's not a recent sport. They say the resolution. They say that that we're 200 million. We have evidence that this is enough. They say it's only $30 million less. You should still draw a line of potential number of cases. We have evidence to find the context of Lebanon. The inflation, they said, I'm not going for it. Continue increase of aid happening in the status quo. Their impact on the bomb talks about the increase of assistance, which either links to our critique of the camp plan, what's all the critique. This year we have responded to the question of the questions of the Middle Eastern terrorism in terms of a purely Western perspective, where we create a notion such as, according to the one evidence of a Muslim mind, the necessity of responding with resolute hardness in order to determine that they can understand our force throughout the world. This is problematic. Metaphors is determine and decide how we respond to the world. We can move a whole group of people as merely object, a Muslim mind that only responds to question the forces our core evidence beliefs as colonialism has dictated United States American foreign policy, instead of understanding how we get this process. We only assume that we can continue to increase threats. This is not where post 9/11 we increase the constant force of attack. What has happened? Increased violence and increased terrorism. Increased terrorism. Arbitrary evidence explains that the concept. Arbitrary evidence explains the process of colonialism is what enables intervention, constant colonial genocide, and conflict is the imagination that results in these problems. They say 9/11 proves the arguments reversed. The true 9/11 led to an attack. Ask yourself why. Ace of points. We were in places such as Saudi Arabia. The United States can constantly extend its military influence between people who respond. Base of point. Think about the Lebanon bombs. The United States had troops there and constantly intervene. What happened is massive increase of terrorism. Seize point. 9/11 does not prove your argument. It does not lead to the resolution. That's the cross-section. Construction of territories, of global polarization, and determination, ensuring eventual extinction, and for killing oneself in the process of killing others, not the charity resistance so much to spread prayer, like the activists make it so to understand what the company like ideas for describe relationship and even and types of construction to address other understanding about the political deadline, thinking for security, terror, the attitude, purpose, part, rights, propagation, death, and very poor, why self worth, destruction, self coexistence, and the paradigm of security, terror. We had endured death and 4.8 provision, context of security, practical state politics, consideration, cast our confidence, paradigm times come to work towards the prevention of cast everything towards the critical thinking, analysis, forecast, conquer, refusal to imitation, criticism, the Machiavellian politics, of polarized arguments, either one defensive, victimized, or defensive war, and here above all, we must guard against the ideology, the promise of clandestine complicity, opponents that will lead to the destruction of the world. They say we do not wish away violence. That is still a part question. Our business boss evidence we do not wish away the world, but ask questions about how we get to the Middle East, how we represent these policies. It's not wish away the questions, but as questions as policymakers and scholars, how we respond. They say 200. They say it would escalate. They say it would escalate. I don't know what your escalation arguments are. Business boss evidence explain this is a product of turf battles. People explain the necessity to increase assistance to specific areas, or the necessity to crack down terrorism in order to preserve their own bureaucratic control of the United States foreign policy. They say no, we have an agent and it's illegitimate. They say we don't have an agent and it's illegitimate. There's no impact of agent if we win. There's no impact of this argument if we win. It's a part question. Our business boss explains how we should respond. How we should respond to the Middle East, and they should be prepared to make the argument that begs to question all the fairness arguments. There's no limit understanding the policy making and only critiques the structural assumptions without critiques, not having occasionalist alternatives, only ability to impact questions of ideology, assumption, ethics. The recent history also proves that they strengthen the discussion of policy development, security, environmental ethics, demonstrate the intersection between philosophical, theoretical, and policy scholarship. But what he sees the focus of the debate, they chooses a representation of everything in it. They should be prepared to defend the concept of the war on terrorism, use approaches toward the Middle East, or the validity of their scholarship. They are responsible for when they see the political choice and advance of the framework resulting can be defended. They say permutation do both. It's still obviously clearly links. One is the concept of the Muslim mind. I explained substantial part of the New York Times evidence, some of their New York Times evidence, as well as Russia Harm talked about the importance of responding only in force. Second of all, it's the concept of Vietnam and credibility. The only the response wasn't the United States pulled out. The problem wasn't that we were there in the first place, but increased intervention. Three issues: hardline credibility. Our Billiken evidence explains that we create the instability of the Middle East and instability and terrorism order, increased conflict. Voting for the permutation we severance because they ignore both the reputation and the policy efforts of the plan, which is conditioned on terrorism. Doesn't please just chill arguments. We would absolutely negative doesn't get via. That's absurd. If not in front of, we win every single debate. We can never respond with a counterplan makes it impossible for us to test policy conditions as well as the structural assessment. Affirmative, they say counterplan multiple conditionality is bad that we enter. And the one of the they say discourse is they say discourse focus trades off of solitude. What does it trade off if we make arguments about what's a prior question? The alternative exposes this politicized character to open critical spaces for mandatory forms of knowledge and practice prerequisite to any other argument, objection, and so. Rather than aim to start contestable political characters, dominant narratives, the way in which Islamic characters and socially constructing excellence, threatening the discourse, front discrete policy parts, exposing the ideological effects of political technology and discourse, tends to open up critical space for articulation of alternative mandatory practices, given the enormous amount of social structure war and terrorism, particularly nonviolent response takes immense significance to the discourse of inherently unstable critical continues against the present junction, providing the opportunity moment to gain deliberate, distinct practice. Scholars have to be responsible to challenge articulation and several levels of narratives, adopt discourse to explore into alternative forms. They say the alternative does not create any change. What kind of change
change. We've read evidence about the problem of U.S. responses to the Middle East. If we want the affirmative change and the process towards which they enact the plan and both their responses and representations, that's not a reason why your change is good. Why their change is a good thing. And this worst forms of imperial atrocity are always calculating with a good intention. This clear response to their colonialism arguments, shocking, and except even the most ghastly colonial problems, such as the Belgian conquest or professed benevolent intention, colonialism can always be interpreted enabling violation, systematic eradication, we think speaking, being this view about direct upon the parallel to a child born to birth, the child is born, yet the rape remains reprehensible, effects linked and enabling that cannot be based for the justification for the violation of violence between native self with institutionalized within the colonialized populace, given the scale of colonial intervention is good, and attention should not be used to overlook the unintended consequences. It makes similar situation, genocide, psychological colonialism, incredible arguments of the consolidation of Jewish Arab identities in the Mediterranean, and the security of Western self always comes at the expense of an orientalized other. Their system of valuations incoherent with their filtered Western centrism. Burke and Seth have to get rid of the political violence of blind which we're told to take modern power structure. What means your security? Who knows? The security is the well-being more than ever. You need to ask yourself who is secure more than a decade after the Cold War, after the policy disaster, committed security, no longer security, homeless security, universally found a destructive spirit of a center of domination, dominant print of universality is that it's always hard to be secure. And these discourses of security open the floodgates to constant genocide, tracking the otherness, psychological recommend considering the requirements of political comprehension, dialogue, way to protect against institutions of Orientals and Orientals and doctrine of otherness, constitutes the one's own potential and must be considered the first principle Orientals to otherness be reduced to sameness, opening the floodgates, conquest, colonialism, imperialism, and genocide. The next argument takes no impact to colonialism. The Belgium the example both about Africa makes is obviously untrue, but even in the good intentions killed hundreds of millions of people throughout Africa. Think about what's happened in South America, both Latin America, to prosecute action. This Oriental hierarchy is what has created a white racial frame. This Oriental racism ensures continued war, genocide, and conflict toward 70. Racial inequalities, defensive hierarchy, solution, elimination, those considered throughout the genocide culture wars become embedded in institutions defended by individuals. They're not us, but they're difference between the Arabs and us. Racism presents to the white race frame, concept of global the conflicts of nuclear power and the war on terrorism. The terms that were set by institutions that fought the colonial authentication led to the exclusion, war, genocide, violence, pulled together, seamless, continued colonial oppression, guarantees of perpetuation, escalation, violence, racial differentiation, the colonial oppression is integral to the every violence, colonialism continues, opposed colonial existence of the violent geographies of new form of conflict, basically war, terrorism is key to solve this crisis. The importance of threatening results are evidence obviously responsible.
Okay, you read a lot of evidence or make a lot of analysis about sort of how the alternative can change the way that the United States acts towards the world and understands the world, correct?
Well, we make evidence about what scholars in the church show.
Right, understood. Do you read any evidence that indicates that the alternative solves for anybody else?
Well, we read evidence about how we should position ourselves in the debate.
Okay, well, how should we position ourselves towards the
Biswat's
world?
evidence and the Bilgan evidence explains as both scholars and potential policymakers, their response isn't to engage in turf battles over the correct governmental response to terrorism or the Middle East, but they come to prior conceptions about the truth values of our claims, whether or not these have past historical baggages, the problems of colonialism. Our evidence explains those questions need to respond to before we can begin asking ourselves, what ought we do as policy?
Okay, well, that's all well and good, but I don't understand in a world in which you've conceded that massive terrorist attacks are inevitable. Well, I mean, you have, like, or at least there's not an answer in the 2 and C about anything related to how other people view the United States or how external non-state actors are motivated.
No,
Given that, why should we not take that into account?
No, I really don't think that's true. We've read a number of cards that we think are quite powerful in this evidence. The Jackson card and the first card I read in the beginning.
Yeah, this Jackson card just says that the way that we can conceptualize the Middle East affects the way that the United States or the way we act towards the Middle East.
Sure, the card says our descriptions of terrorism have produced our responses and our assumptions of the Muslim mind and the necessity of
understood, and that affects the way that we act towards the world. But do you have any evidence that even speaks to the intention of the external actors who pose a threat to the United States, which is the entire thesis of the 1AC?
Sure. Our evidence.
What? Which evidence? Because this Jackson evidence certainly doesn't.
I think most of the first card I read in the top of the 2C explains that if our responses become a question of hardline action and our descriptions of terrorism creates a global civil war, that it's not just terrorists or people that don't currently like the United States. It's not like they don't have any or singular justification.
Totally understood. But all of that evidence is historically descriptive, i.e. this is what caused the problem of terrorism in the status quo, which is what all of your examples, such as troops in Saudi Arabia and troops in Lebanon, are descriptive of.
Heaven forbid, I provided historical examples of my argument.
And I would encourage you to do so. However, In a world in which terrorists currently want to attack the United States, and we can't go back and withdraw our troops from Saudi Arabia as per the request of Osama bin Laden, what do we do to confront the current threat that the United States currently faces from non-state actors that would use any means necessary in order to inflict harm upon innocent
You
civilians?
done with your temper tantrum?
I'm just asking.
Okay. Our BizWAS evidence and Gilligan evidence explains what our first response ought to be, which I've already responded to. I answered you.
All right. It's going to be the critique, just conditionality, then the T constructing agent, and then the counterpart. All set?
Multiple against your walls, go to keep neck flush, not conditionality, peanut critiques, cover the city, which keeps testing new affirmatives, testing different angles, they should be able to defend those representations and the different parts of the planet else would never be able to have granted against new affirmatives, and strategic thinking, multiple choice, tactical choice, theory, better one's harder, best policy, options, as much as educational, comparable options, independently, the different aspects, how you justify this policy, keep clarifies, it's outside by infinite prep, you get the focus, last speech, and new affirmative special give the year, and a huge topic, with the shots of what proposed, cheat check, terms, take 2 seconds to read your simple counterpoints, key check theory, chiefs like noting, the artificial inflated, devoting issues, cash control, be logical, policy, option, conditionalities, worse than thinking, first arguments, we should be able to get one conditional counterpoint, one conditional critique. Next, the T. Quid pro quo. They say Crocker 89 is biased because he was part of the deal, but he doesn't want to see race before Baker's and protect the principle of science, but he was less biased. They say offer how record heritage to get off present items rejecting the unconditionally offering. They say functional limits, there's no functional limits because policy advocates don't check the checks off proofs. You can just find advocates for the carriage goods and the quotes and back together. You can't rely on added conditionary theory arguments proves the judge's bias. It's hard. You should have to get a capital and get score 1 air negative. The most limiting interpretation of the resolution we are substantive there because for every hearing you can unite demands there's no strategy to hedge versus all the different quotes. The quotes that can have just unpredictable. We don't have any generic strategy. The only discussion of the conditions happens in oral of our interpretation because if the firm is unconditional, they can say conditions bad against add conditions, which means we only get that debate under our interpretation. It's usually this proves why we need added condition because the infinite quotes. They say the key to respond to the country over we solve education better because we need strategy to lead to a better discussion of the conditions good bad in that particular country. They say reasonability, but it's not because they demanded a single prisoner. We don't have any literature on this. It's possible to predict research burden is a form of ignorance because you have to research the slender interpretations only non way to evaluate the resolution of all the judges mentioned next to the counterpoint. They say perm to the counterplan. However, it's illegitimate because it severs the plan with the counterplan. The less restrictive deals offered in the plan is no longer an option. Doing the counterplan excludes the plan and rescinds the offer, and the counterplan does not include the plan. In the world, the counterplan, the offer made by the plan is not an option, does not exist because we sever the part of the plan that gives them the aid, even if they don't do what we demand. What that is beyond in the world of the counterplan. They say perm to do both offers. It doesn't solve all of the. They say textual competition. The counterplan is functionally competitive, which would be enough to explain earlier. Functional competition is sufficient. There's no reason the counterplan should have to be both functional and textual. Functional is sufficient. Textual competition is a bad standard. Makes travel counterplan plans competitive, ban the plan not competitive. We need to ban the plan in order to get unions to disadvantage. The reason why that is not necessary. Counterplan is keep test the corporal functional competition is the only way that we get to do that. They say permutation to do both, however, doesn't solve all of their clarification arguments because doing twice would fail because it would make it look really confusing. Also, they don't make it don't solve arguments. It would be new in the 1 year thing. Then we're only checking the block institutes regard to do it, so don't allow it later. Even if they do make it, it still doesn't solve because we wrote in the counterplan they only get it if they do both, which means they can only get the funding once additionally conditions are key to them to solve. They want to voluntarily here for the Lebanese will the one who will release the U.S. Lebanon to try to futures for bad counts. No action is taken. The issue more out of terror for the Lebanese Americans came up with Lebanese authority criminal the process designed with our serious scales of questions will be credible to the U.S. and individual solutions with the Western countries more for Lebanon's first steps in choosing the comfortable well calculated. They say that the permutation to do both, however, they would just accept the plan of the counterplan. Now is now they say that the counterplan is abuse of our words good. It's necessary to check whether Cooper Pro the topics Cooper Pro should be debating farmers should get to really pick whatever until they want. But however, that means we have to wait for half an hour to decide which ones to include in every debate with today, which means that the only way to check that is if we get to add an additional one. Additionally, the counterplan helps balance the topic. The literature is biased toward constructing the issue. We should not be stuck with hard like policies, and the counterplan makes research burdens unmanageable because the negative can never be read from the details of deals that can make. Additionally, it's key to forcing farmers to have literature defending there. This is a quote in the pro saying that it's an exclusive deal that proves it's the only way to actually limit the topic. And unconditional capital never checks because we don't have any way to leverage against things that they can demand from the country. It trades often leads to worse abuse. Capital you can't read this. You have to be forced to do things like consultation or exception capital that would be more abusive because you can't have any way to leverage against everyone else. The negative would never win any debate. Counter petition should only allow conditions on the receiving country. That way, to solve other arguments like condition on other countries. Additionally, we don't limit because the counterplan is normal limiting the plan. The Cooper Code, the plan is limited by literature advocates. So is the counterplan. They should defend their Cooper Code. They have access to literature. We're relying on their Affirmative reason why you should err. Negative, especially on the top of something for rows. I didn't leave us all TFK anyway proven. If I wanted to be done, there's a number of steps that you could take that included action limit on basic reason as well as counts. Their next argument is that the adding a condition kills the plan over. We solve that across experts. The issue is holding terrorists accountable. The warrant and other cards is that we must in every instance punish those who support or enact terrorism. The counter bruise the F doesn't do that because they don't cause Lebanon to freeze. Their terrorist acts for Hezbollah turns the case Middle East and Philippines. Lebanon's collapse cause more terrorism. They're trying to hedge bigger than theirs because they only do 1% of what we do in the entire funding business for Hezbollah, which is the reason why Lebanon's key Myers and Pool 6. Operating on Lebanon Hezbollah as among duties for an example of financial support of terrorists. They have a plans pandemic almost Hezbollah 6 not limited to Israel. It extends to America. Many terrorists are not only for Hezbollah. That's what most common is a terrorist organization in the world with an annual budget level of 100 million, plus more than 250 to 30,000 men on the arms. Are the most successful terrorist organization of the modern days. More evidence of terror finance keeps the only way to deter attacks, trigger, and take for all. 5 the higher value terrorist listing was like getting the deterrent from the city for the largest sector in this country system of financial some elements are more difficult to determine the financial most motivating, not the most least to deter, although the funding finance is impossible to determine the thing is resource financial there to defer and part of the sensation part of the side that the price is too high. They say that the Garter evidence of the YC evidence is nothing since the plan is creates a signal. They have no evidence that the support of their argument that they create confusion or that the capital fails. They don't have the evidence that connects the single prisoner into a large and other issues connected that causing confusion. They say clear to keep a lot of terror links to the affirmative. It is a random deal to release all one prisoner proves that no one understands why we're giving so much money just to release a single person. Is also a moral hazard, which proves why it would be confusing to all. And there are cards that they read about how the capital is a moral hazard links just as hard to them because they also give money to the government to get it back, and also links harder to the permutation because if they do it twice, it means it would be confusing. They won't understand why. Then another clarifying argument are specific to the plan. They have 2 sets of cards. They have one set of cards saying the condition that should be on the prisoner, and another set of cards saying that clarity is key. They don't have a card saying if we do additional conditions with the terror with the prisoner that would create a confusion, which means that they don't have any guarantees to constitute these arguments, which you should error negative because they don't have a single argument or much reason why they should condition 8 levels of support for the organization. That also links the plan above how they create an equal moral hazard. They say they see no reforms are possible. This card links just as much to the plan because they should also a form of reform. They say yes to the plan. They say yes to the counter plan. Also assumes democracy reforms off something like the counter plan. And I'm going to go back here, but first I'm going to answer perm to the plan condition on the issue. That would be intrinsic as unfair because they can get rid of any counter plan means and they can never arrest the never to check the act quid pro quo. They can always use other carrots and possibles to generate offense, money, fairness, to just get the original justification for the perm to make no one's later in Lebanon. It looks the other way on terrorism as a bargaining chip, which means they say yes to the counter plan to Guevara for the central question of the Lebanese government bringing Allah how to be transformed the law. This is the president office one of the most missing expeditions. Lebanese one the issue. The words is a bargaining chip more absolutely. 5 my president the deal with the commenting on terrorism, conscious terror acts. Lebanon correct for my comment U.S. minister such as the counter terrorism more absolutely wall.
What their T card on offer says it can be conditional. We win it's bad if they are.
Their card on T only says it can be conditional. We're winning it's bad if they are.
Your T card. Substantial. Unconditional. Counter plan. Critique. Good? Because I just jumped up and down, so I'm good. Ready? Substantial approval. We don't shift the goalpost. We do $200 million. Always have said so. There's evidence that says 130. Substantial doesn't include 200. It just says that 230 is more vigorous than our arguments. Well, that vigorous isn't the resolution. That which does say the one in cross sex has to be defined in context, but their card doesn't define it at all. In context or out of context, our evidence defines in context for decision says it's $10 million. Arbitrary is bad because $1 more or less, and the AF always loses on T there. Definitional support is a gateway to all arguments. Why it's better or worse for the topic. I said our counter interpretation $10 million. Functional limit means they can always lose. Those arguments are too small to actually get any quote. Means the AF will lose. Reason why quid pro quo is good thing. Also proves why the wide range of contextual evidence is bad because it says 10 million, says 230. It's possible to tell him conceded or de facto counter-interpretation needs solvency applicant conceded. So predictability, but Fry says $200 million. Also, there's no abuse to $30 million, no arguments, no budget is that you can or cannot run with that. There's no possible reason to vote here if we win any risk of reasonability. That's also more educational to allow the after debate. Quid pro quo. 2 net benefit, better limit. 1 definitional and exclusive many of the internal U.S. policy changes have no connection to our country policy. 2 functional, force the app to take generous enough U.S. action to elicit positive response. Limits the topic of plans advocated as complete packages to avoid and exclude the condition counterplan or an added condition counterplan. Their interpretation cuts net ground, taking away national politics CAs like Iranian nationalism, aside credibility of the counterplan. 2 unilaterally test the essential diplomatic component of the topic. It's all the education debate he identifies in the 1 in R and all the reasons for their interpretation. Assume the quid pro quo is artificially tacked on. We force the plans advocated as complete packages, solves all their offense, and they do not limit the form of the app's engagement, which is key. Recent topics demonstrate predictable net ground comes with the topic mechanism. More in its case areas, they allow internal U.S. decisions that don't even address the topic commentary. He's not biased. He was the one who invented the term R. Evidence is the only one that says by definition. Our Moody evidence is the only exclusive evidence that indicates it must be conditioned on policy change. Offers another word in the resolution means if constructive engagement is anywhere close to reason default, they've conceded exclusive grand bargains, which is literature. Key to half ground. It's a key half. It's the most predictable one from the beginning of the year, most predictable one now. The reasonability debate, they can limit out one case and the cause of substance cried out. Quid pro quo apps have been read all year long. We've read them all year long. What each school does, predictability is more important. Like Wake always reads quid pro quo. Harvard never does. That allows them the room to debate. At this point of the year, there's no reason to figure out a completely irresolvable year of quid pro quo debates. Counterplay. They concede on the case of the Middle East is empirically not necessarily impacted the net benefit. Zero risk. You vote after. According to the counter plan, doesn't sever the word offer. The plan reserves the right to change the deal. It's as though the plan said with the potential for added conditions or evidence defines offer in the context of quid pro quo. Still 100% defends the plan, including its use of the word offer. That's a conceded card in the 1 in R. Doesn't functionally sever textual is good. It eliminates bad sale counter plans like it's told unpredictable ones like this. And you must be both functional and textual. Solves all his arguments. Reject the firm, not the team if it's not. And it's difficult. Default to it doesn't compete. It agrees with the plan that we should condition assistance on Hamidi. And our topic, the comicality definition on the other flow is irrelevant. It's an issue of changing the deal from the one I see now. We'll concede added condition counterplans are legitimate. Functional limits on topical quid pro quo are solved now. They firm do both, even if it doesn't actually solve the net benefit. Solves any potential added benefit to just mentioning the issue. Can turn the case. The plan is sufficient to solve terror. Resolve conceded evidence. The counterplan isn't necessary to do it. They say it links to the app. No, making a big deal out of it only sends a bigger signal that we're furious that Ali Hamidi is still free. We have one AC cards that making a complete advantage conceded. We saw no reason to do the counterplan. They say they've conceded evidence and conditioning on Hezbollah is a win for them because it makes it look like the U.S. takes them seriously, when in fact, what we need to do is just say we don't care whether you're Hezbollah or not, we don't care whether Lebanon funds you or not, we're not going to let you kill Americans. Perm plan and added issue, attest the link to the plan, even if these kind of plans are legitimate, intrinsic, this is justified to see. If it's a logical reason to vote neg, logic outweighs as a prerequisite to good education, fair rules, and fair argument conditionality. Okay. The answer to how to respond to the world is to demonstrate American resolve. The alternative does not eliminate all U.S. hardline policies that make people hate us. If it did, the permutation would overwhelm. Since they do not, our only option, we've heard one I see, our only option is to make those hardline policies effective by just stopping resolve and deterring people who they've conceded will kill us and everyone else on earth. We read one I see evidence that cites the entire foreign policy community, including scholars that they advocate and indicate that all of them agree that an attack is inevitable in the next 10 years. All their truth value issues beg the question, why can't they provide analytic or evidence answers to our particular scenarios? 9/11 was real, actual people who died. It was an actual, this turns their impact. Also, they've conceded that preventing attack stops our retaliation, stops us from intervening in those stations, stops us from committing genocide. Means that if it's a non-unique scenario, the alternative gets solved. There's no explanation of what the alternative does in the 2NC. There's no extinction impact. Unlike our arguments, there's no unique link or explanation how it causes this. They've conceded the 2AC analytic that there's been 2,000 years of no extinction. Even in a world of colonialism, it doesn't turn the case because we're saying the exact opposite of it. Asking questions is wishing away violence. It's doing nothing and leaving people to die. Either way, it's bad. Even if the questions end up answered, we're all dead first. They've seen time frame evidence that happens very soon. The critique can't be prior to the app. The entire app says this is how we should engage the world, which means even if we don't get our plan in a classic sense, the entire one I see that says we should have resolved on terrorism is still an impact chart in their world. It justifies our way of viewing the Middle East. If you see those scenarios, everyone will die. The permutation to do the plan and non-conflicting parts of the alternative solves all of this because if we can overrule the status quo, we can overrule the plan as well. There's so much hardline policy now. Don't allow new 2NR explanations of what the alternative does or how it solves. Even if the U.S. created this situation in the Middle East, it exists now, which means we have to address it as it is. There are people coming to kill us. The only risk is we solve the impact of the critique by creating a peaceful world. They can see the Khalil's out evidence that gives it deters war worldwide. They say test policy on neg fiat. That just proves you should focus on the plan because it allows us to see whether or not it's a good idea. They've also seen they have a burden of rejoinder because we're bound by the coin flip to be affirmative. Also, they say on theory that it's better when debate is harder. That takes on ground impacts and topicality. They say they open space, but stopping violent people from killing us is a prerequisite to opening space. There's no benefit to being able to sit around and think when people are coming to kill us.
That's lame.
That's the lane evidence. The 2NC is a series of links to a critique that we have impact turn. Look the entirety of the one I see. The Jones 99 evidence indicates it fails. He just extends colonialism impacts and says an open space. That doesn't go anywhere because the rest of the world doesn't know that's our project. We don't even know what the agent of the alternative is. Even if it's not unfair, it's the reason they don't solve anything. You can't explain to me right now what it does. Their constructives are over. You can't explain it to me after the debate. He just reads a bunch of cards in the 2NC. New 2NR explanation shouldn't be allowed, or at least gets new 2AR answers. They say it kills millions. Even if colonialism is bad, global economic collapse and nuclear reactors are worse because they've conceded those cause extinction. The Dickinson evidence indicates there's no impact to colonialism because of our democratic form of government that provides checks and different notes of power so we can't kill one another. They've also seen evidence at the bottom that the war on terror is good. The Viet Cong were real, the terrorists are real, everyone knows that, even their scholars. They can't tell you a reason why it's not true. We have to stop them. Oh, God.
Counterblame, see quid pro quo.
Yeah. Take not going for permutations to reason direct argument. You don't vote for permutations. You don't vote for permutations. View all permutations not to be intrinsic which reasons rejecting the conditionalities. The critical test with multiple angles. You've chosen imperative focus of the front of the faith is critical, especially in context of critique testing them from multiple assumptions. They defend the focus when they see it's the only logical response to the question. A little bit of a book in the one yard. The camp at the top here are two important concessions in this debate. Ace to point as Lebanon would agree to the entire get the camp plan. When agreed to the camp plan, we have two pieces of evidence. Our girl evidence explains to use financing comparison on buying for hardy evidence they would use. They would say yes to accommodate U.S. demands. Our Zimba evidence limited terror cooperation that says we need to increases, and our adverse evidence financial leverage and particularly gets them to crack down financial carriers. And based upon they conceded a couple pieces of 1 hour evidence that should be important. Our tracker evidence is that we need to target finances in order to deter future attacks, even if they wouldn't resolve is important. Our tracker evidence is the deciding question in order to respond to results of targeting the funds that exist. And that's the 1 hour evidence. Although the 1 hour evidence explains demonstrating a commitment to significant resources in order to cut off those necessary to punish the financials or the large sponsors of terrorism, which means we send a stronger signal, even if the send one questions our influence as a deciding person for sponsors of terrorism with access or impacts better, which means they cannot have a reason why this one guy can solve all terrorism. That's clear, and the counterplans is a better signal of credibility. Our Myers evidence is where Lebanon is critical given its increasing funding to terrorist organizations globally, and all the spillover arguments means even if they win, it might be a win for Hezbollah. We are critical to the larger signal to crack down terrorism arguments of permutation to the camp plan. He was a little unclear here in the 1 yard on exactly what he was extending, whether or not it was permutation to the camp plan or perm both or what the hell, but we will say permutation is illegitimate. Ace to point the 1 yard made it clear, and their own team that interpretation on the constructive engagement argument of offer makes it clear that it means to accept or reject. It means to accept or reject. Their card says it can be conditional, that they can make the decision to change. We flag, and the 1 yard the deciding question is ground whether or not it is good or bad. Obviously, you can change it. The resolution says it can. Your plan says we have made arguments why support. We'll extend those arguments here. First of all, they not extend textual competition. I don't think in the 1 yard, but they didn't. They explicitly kicked in the 1 yard. They can see functional competition overwhelming critical to ground, which gets terminal defense of all the arguments, which means that we functionally part listen to plans. They can see critical testing affirmative from multiple angles prevents it from doing things like counter planning and uniqueness. They've chosen plan. They say offer made this offer interpretation. This card just says that someone a male person can change the offer interpretation both plan. We flag this as an argument why debate was more important. Even if they have a definition of what it could be, we said you ought not be, and it means it says they can change it. That is possible, which means that the affirmative should not be able to do this job. They do not flag this as a reason why they're allowed to change the questions, except the reason why this camp plan is critical. First of all, they forces the affirmative to tie their specific quid to their specific quote. Sure, they can find evidence why the context of the affirmative is important. They might say yes, but this allows an infinite number of cases, such as providing foreign assistance to one person instead of a broader package trades off of the larger question of constructive engagement, because they can limit the camp plan forces to defend a question and force to defend solvency evidence can tie them together. You can see camp plan is critical to balance because the affirmative chooses the area that they want to talk about and chooses whether or not they want to be constructive engagement, and even chooses more whether they want those conditions to be tied to the only camp plan can check against. So they also not respond to the unconditional camp plan can never check any of these questions because the unconditional because smart affirmatives will tie it to their demand, which is not necessary. There are cases on this year's topic that tie them specifically. They know the security guarantees for nuclear weapons as Taki evidence defending the Grand Bargain Acts lists exactly what they want them to do, which means this is not an unreasonable interpretation to be ready for. It does not cause a race to the bottom because we can only read in the context that we can see that we have a solvency advocate that says we should tie increased assistance to decreasing their support for financial assistance. That we also can see the research would not be exclusive just because it forces a little bit more unpredictable for the affirmative. This is the reason rejected. They say textual solvency leads to bad camp plans. Except right, the reason why textual competition bad. They said reject the permutation list. They're not going for permutation to the camp plan. Their offer argument. I do not know what the 1AR is doing here. But if they extended the permutation to the camp plan, we run the reason that was bad. They say it's clearly Sevens was the voting issue trades off the response to the arguments. They say they would agree with the plan. This is not a response. We sever the offer. The example of if I promise to wash your car for $5 and then instead so you have to wash it for $5 and a hamburger, it rescinds on the initial offer, so it does not agree with those plans. Agree with the plans. They say permutation to both. We read two pieces of evidence on the importance of conditioning it that they only respond, and it's a bargaining chip for them, which means they would not give it away for free. Their only argument about the mention of it doesn't make a lick of sense because our evidence talks about the importance of cutting off financial assistance in order to deter future sponsors of terrorism, which means the camp plan, the permutation of both. They also concede it would not be clear because we provide mixed signals to
to Lebanon, which would decrease our credibility. Flag one in our argument, they did not respond to. They say the camp plan's unnecessary. Not true. We have evidence about the importance of cutting off financial system. They say the plan the one sees are complete advance. That would not be true if the one in our did read evidence on the importance of cutting off financial system to respond to terrorism. Their Hezbollah argument doesn't care. This card is awful. Ace point. This card is talking about holding up assistance to Hezbollah, not the Lebanese government. That does not make any sense. B's point, they can see assistance is happening in the status quo, which means all your arguments are neville. Even if Hezbollah is getting win the status quo, because we are providing assistance to them and conditioning it on by giving it to the Lebanese armed forces, which means their argument is not unique. But the difference here is that we condition on increasing their financial assets. They can see Lebanon's key, which would end Hezbollah, which means even if they win, gets a win for Hezbollah, it's not important. If they are key to the overall financing of Hezbollah, then they can see this deterrence is critical to stop terrorism, which is a stronger argument. They say that intrinsic permutation, they can see a couple of arguments are important here. First of all, if the overall nature of the camp plan is good, they should not be able to have intrinsic permutation. The logic argument doesn't make any sense. So the point of it forces the affirmative to defend the linkage between the two. It doesn't. It's a reason why it's good. B, the point of it means it can add things onto anything. For example, if we want a counter plan to have the United States federal government do something against a pig, they can add the part that the United States federal government should and claim a net benefit off that, which means it's not predictable from the negative. If we want the kind of reason why their interpretation is bad, the reason why they shouldn't be elected to this, intrinsicness makes it possible for us to generate offense because they can change any form of the camp plan. We want functional competition. Our argument is a reason why they should lose. Listen, if we have evidence on the importance of deterring financial incentives, they say yes to the plan, and the permutation to do both means they would say no because it's a bargaining chip, and it's greater solvency for the counterplan.
It'll be the counterplan. A couple of easy ways out of this round. Here's the easiest. First of all, is that they have conceded that there is absolutely no solvency deficit to the plan. They've conceded the Gardner and Gates evidence, which indicates that the plan is necessary to solve a global resort of terrorism. The only impact of the plan is, or the only impact of the counter plan is an increased signal of resolve. But this doesn't apply in a world in which you're not winning a solvency deficit to the plan, which means that in a world in which the plan solves the signal of terrorism, then there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to solve wouldn't be able to deter Hezbollah attacks in the future. This means that there's no net benefit to the counter plan for a couple reasons. First is that the only thing the only net benefit to the counterplan is the increased signal, which the plan solves anyway. B is that they have conceded that there's no impact on the Middle East war, which means that there's no external net benefit to doing the counterplan. C is resumption shifts to the affirmative of the war of the counterplan. Otherwise, they could just counterplan with the plan and win on presumption, which is essentially what they did, which means that there's no external net benefit to the counterplan. Then there's no reason you win, even if you evaluate their Traeger evidence and indicate that they would solve an increased signal of resolve. They have no reason why the plan's increased signal of resolve wouldn't be able to solve Hezbollah in the future, especially in a world in which they have conceded spillover evidence with. Which means that we'd be able to solve the future attack. Additionally, their trigger card just indicates that financiers are easy to deter, not that the plan fails to deter the terrorists themselves, which means that there's no external net benefit. You should vote for the plan. Additionally, you shouldn't do any work here because he does zero impact calculus on what ultimately is the net benefit of the counterplan. He doesn't even explain the reason why you should vote on increased solvency evidence, which means that if you can't establish a firm difference between the resolve of the plan and the counterplan, you vote affirmative on presumption, given that they do the entirety of the plan. The second easy way out is permutation to do the counterplan. The words of Percy's definition is the only interpretation of offer that is extended throughout the entirety of the debate. He does not get to the topicality violation, so do not look me in the face after the end of the round and indicate that there is any other interpretation of the word offer, because they did not fucking extend one in the two and our works, and Percy's evidence indicates that the offer does not imply an actual does not imply the exact offer, but rather it can be changed in a reasonable way. This is certainly, I can see that the permutation would certainly be reasonable because it includes the entirety of the plan. The rescinding argument doesn't make any sense because the way we interpret offer in the plan text, the way we interpret offer in the plan text, and the fact that the offer is in the plan text means that there could be minor modifications made to the counterplan, i.e. the added of the other condition there. Entire competition of the counterplan relies on the fact that the plan text is the actual policy that ultimately gets implemented. However, this is not true, and he has not extended any arguments. Additionally, they have conceded that it's not textually competitive. He's also conceded this as counter-interpretation that indicates that you have to be both textually and functionally competitive. He extends a couple of his functional competition or good arguments and indicates that they are reasons why technical competition is bad. However, that is not true. They are just reasons why functional competition is good, not reasons why you shouldn't have to be both. They have conceded a couple of reasons why technical competition is uniquely necessary. First of all, is they are necessary to eliminate bad counterplans such as this because they simply add words to the plan, which
which shouldn't be competitive with plan action because it certainly just minorly changes the way that the card plan ultimately does. They say that you have to accept or reject the plan. However, you don't have to accept or reject it. The exact plan text, our evidence indicates that you can make minor modifications to the plan text in a reasonable fashion if you determine that our plan or the permutation is actually reasonable, which you absolutely should, given that it includes the entirety of the plan text and simply adds a couple of words afterwards, and it's not a major condition that shouldn't be done. They say that it's a question of whether it's good or bad. However, this is totally irrelevant because in a world in which we can simply add the condition, it is not necessarily bad. They say functionality outweighs. However, this doesn't apply in the world of our counter interpretation because you have to be both functionally and textually competitive, which is the best interpretation, because not only does it solve the net benefits of their interpretation, all the reason why functional competition is good, but it also avoids the reason why textual competition is necessary in order to solve. They say the offer interpretation is stupid. However, he doesn't explain this. He also doesn't extend the interpretation of offer that way, which means that you have to accede to ours. Which means you have to accede to ours. Additionally, the word offer in the plan text reserves the right to change the deal, which means that it functionally does not sever and doesn't change the deal. This no links all of his better for debate offense. Look, group the rest of the debate on this interpretation. All of the following reasons are reasons why functional competition is good, not reasons why they shouldn't have to be functionally and textually competitive. Additionally, none of them address the reasons why we should be able to make minor modifications to the plan text as a result of the plan, as long as the permutation text includes the entirety of the plan action. Then it is certainly a reasonable modification, given that the word offer is in the plan text. We are the only team with the interpretation of offer. They do not have one. They did not get to the debate, which means that you should not vote on it. Additionally, it is not severance because we do not sever the initial offer of the plan. We simply add a minor modification. If you conclude that this interpretation is reasonable and they have not explained why it is not, then you should vote affirmative on this counterplan, not drop down to the do both permutation we're not going for. He says it's a necessary bargaining trick. However, this doesn't apply in the world of the other permutation because we do the entirety of the counterplan and it is relevant. He says that it is not clear, which means it sends mixed signal. However, it does not send mixed signal. All of our evidence indicates that harmony is specifically key to the global result on terrorism. This is also explained in the overview as to why there is no solvency deficit in the case, and in a world in which there cannot articulate that benefit, then you should vote affirmative on perception. Now drop down to the last argument on the floor, which is the permutation to the plan and condition of the rate. He doesn't get here with nearly enough time. He has dropped several offensive arguments that are ultimately made in the 1AR that indicates that this limited intrinsic, this is justified by the artificial competition of the counterplan. Additionally, it is necessary to test whether there is actually a link to plan actions. This is all proven by the fact that they can't explain a single solvency deficit to the plan in the context of why we can resolve, which means that in a world in which we can condition other rate is ultimately necessary. They have also considered that we have a specific solvency advocate for the plan in our FRI evidence, which indicates that we have to condition the aid specifically on this issue, which means that if they don't have any solvency evidence for the counterplan, it justifies the alternate conditions because it proves that the counterplan is conditional. Additionally, it proves that there's no link to the net benefit because it means that if you can condition other aid and solve the exact same, then there's no risk why the counterplan is competitive. They say that the overall nature of the counterplan is good. However, they have not justified this in the context of the resolution. This also doesn't apply to the first part because they do not have interpretation of offer in the debate. They say intrinsicness is bad. However, it is not intrinsic and is justified by the artificial nature of the counterplan. Even if they win these 3 arguments, is the reason to reject the permutation, not the team.
The winner of the 2008 National Debate Tournament on a 5-0 decision is Wake Forest University. second place trophy and the traveling Walker Cup goes to Dartmouth. First place trophy and the Longman Cup goes to Wake Forest University. For the Wake team, like to come and get their watches. And
J.P. Lacey, coach.
watches for Dartmouth.
I'm willing to say some things. I'm also willing to post the ballot. I think a lot of us have agreed to do that. Your call.
Just post it. It's cool. You know we fucked up. No, we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.